Maybe me.
You want the United States to be
Me and the Ayatollah, whoever the Ayatollah is, whoever the next Ayatollah.
You think I'm exaggerating? You know that I'm not. That's the President of the United States of America trying to cover up the fact that he was lying through his teeth yesterday about negotiations with Iran that haven't even taken place, but which he was forced to resile from because Iran didn't respond to the deadline he set for them to reopen the Strait of Hormuz that is not yet reopened. How on earth did this happen?
Okay, so you heard that for yourself. And this is where things start getting interesting, because James O'Brien clearly has a problem with what Trump is saying here. But rather than tell you what I think, listen to how he breaks this down, because the further this conversation goes, the more questions it raises. Have a listen.
Donald Trump yesterday proved what many of us have been saying for a very long time. I think proved beyond any reasonable doubt that he is a deranged idiot who has no idea what he's doing. He is possessed of a sort of atavistic, primal skill set by feeding his own appetites all the time and having become over the years an absolutely, I mean, almost like the apotheosis of self-interest and self-regard. I don't know whether you call it narcissism or whether you call it pathology or whatever you might call it. You look at somebody who somehow manages to achieve great things by only ever feeding his own hideous and insatiable appetites. Whether the appetites are for power, for money, for status, for praise, whatever it may be, it is insatiable and it is unhinged. So we saw yesterday that he will even lie about wars. He will even lie in ways that everybody paying attention will see as blatant lies. He will lie about things that are, I mean, he's so now confident in the sycophancy of his supporters, both in his regime and outside of it, that he feels even more empowered than ever before to tell lies that are not even halfway around the world before the truth has got its trousers on. They are lies so egregious and so huge that they can't even get through the door of the room that he's in before the truth comes crashing down around him. But so complete is the sycophancy with which he is surrounded that nobody ever really points out to him just how obvious the lies he's telling today have become. I want you to listen to this little clip of a conference yesterday where Stephen Miller had praised Donald Trump in ludicrous terms for a straight 5 minutes, at which point he turns to Kash Patel, who runs the FBI, and literally says to him, "So, Kash, see if you can top that. That's a tough one, Kash."
So, Cash, see if you can top that. I don't know. That's a tough one, Cash.
That is tough. You know, Mr. President, as I look around this venue, I see, and I'm reminded again, why we have the greatest warriors on God's green earth, the men and women serving in uniform, the men and women serving and wearing the badge, and law enforcement, our police, our sheriffs around the state of Tennessee. I'm reminded that Americans exist to protect this country day in and day out, and they've done it like we've done it here. But what we didn't have was you. We didn't have a commander-in-chief who backed the blue, who resourced the blue, who funded the military, who did whatever it takes to safeguard every single life. And here in Memphis, Tennessee, you have put on a show for the world. You have allowed us to go out there and capture gangbangers, rapists, murderers, drug dealers at record historic levels. And for me, a first-generation Indian-American kid whose parents fled a genocide in East Africa to become the 9th director of the FBI, I'm living the wildest dream you could possibly imagine, sir.
Oh boy. So we have a little listen to just how impressive a character this man that Kash Patel is talking about truly is.
Thank you.
What about the Strait of Hormuz? Who's going to be in control of that?
That'll be opened very soon if this works.
How soon? And who's in control of it? Will Iran still be able to control the flow of oil?
Be jointly controlled.
By who?
Maybe me. Maybe me.
You want the United States to be in
Me
control
and the Ayatollah, whoever the Ayatollah is, whoever the next Ayatollah.
You think I'm exaggerating? You know that I'm not. That's the President of the United States of America trying to cover up the fact that he was lying through his teeth yesterday about negotiations with Iran that haven't even taken place, but which he was forced to resile from because Iran didn't respond to the deadline he set for them to reopen the Strait of Hormuz that is not yet reopened. How on earth did this happen? Or how can we be confident that the negotiations he claimed yesterday had taken place haven't taken place at all?
And there'll also be a form of a very serious form of a regime change. Now, in all fairness, everybody's been killed from the regime. They're really starting off. There's automatically a regime change. But we're dealing with some people that I find to be very reasonable, very solid. The people within know who they are. They're very respected. And maybe one of them will be exactly what we're looking for. Look at Venezuela, how well that's working out. We are doing so well in Venezuela with oil and with the relationship between the president-elect and us. And maybe we find somebody like that in Iran.
So yesterday he was conducting high-level negotiations, and today he's killed all the people that he could have been conducting high-level negotiations with. But one thing upon which we can all agree.
You know, our country now is respected all over the world. A year and a half ago, we were a laughingstock. We were a laughingstock. The King of Saudi Arabia told me a year and a half ago, he said, President, I can't believe what's happened to America. 1 year ago, you were a laughingstock. Nobody thought you could ever survive. Now you're the hottest country. Use that expression. He said, now you're the hottest country anywhere in the world. And we are now. Congratulations, because we're all partners in this deal. You're the hottest country anywhere in the world. It's really amazing. So I congratulate you. It's a great feeling.
So let's just be clear on that. America and Donald Trump are no longer a laughingstock.
Whose idea was that to put ice in the airport?
We're dealing really...
Whose idea was it?
Mine. That was mine.
And can I ask you,
That was like the paperclip. You know the story of the paperclip? 182 years ago, a man discovered the paperclip. It was so simple. And everybody that looked at it say, why didn't I think of that?
And that is the world today. All of which leads us to the question that is most urgent, of course, and that is what on earth happens next. Just one little postscript to yesterday's programme when we were just looking at the questions of what is going on rather than what happens next. And the suggestion that some of Trump's motivation might have been financial was mooted by one caller. And I had to confess that my allergy to dead cats and conspiracy theories in the context of Donald Trump is diminishing daily, in that anything is possible. You know, yesterday, and lots of other people picked up on this point after I'd come off air, I noticed. I picked up on this point as well. I'm not claiming they were following me. But the idea that you are now left with almost an impossible choice when it comes to who to trust, who is telling the truth. The Iranian regime, the theocratic dictatorship in Tehran, or the President of the United States of America. One of them says we've had amazing negotiations. The other one says we haven't even had a postcard off him. Who do you believe? And there's no real way anybody honest can say that that's an easy question to answer. You're going to lean one way or the other according mostly to vibes and instincts. And it shouldn't be that way. The President of the United States of America should be someone who can at least be taken at face value by his own allies. But no, yesterday there will be people throughout American politics, throughout the world, who just think that the Iranians, hideous though that regime is, are probably telling the truth here, and Trump is probably lying. The day ticks ever closer, doesn't it, when they have to start talking about the Epstein files again to distract from the mess that they've made in Iran. So one of the other postscripts from yesterday's show is about the claim that it was financially motivated, and I did see stories about huge sums of money being essentially placed moments before the announcement in ways that would accrue enormous profits when the markets temporarily recovered from the doldrums as a consequence of Trump's announcement. It gets worse. They've identified 8 newly created accounts, all created around the 21st of March, which laid bets on a US-Iran ceasefire over the weekend that appeared to show signs of insider knowledge, according to experts. So again, I can't believe that I'm saying this, but how shocked would you be if the kind of people in the room where you just heard them competing to lavish the most ludicrous and simply and obviously untrue praise upon Donald Trump, how surprised would you be if they were, or people like that were involved in making huge amounts of money? I mean, illegally, probably, immorally, definitely, out of incredibly sensitive government policy and government information. It is absolutely extraordinary what is going on. And again, much of the media isn't yet ready to acknowledge it, although it got a lot closer yesterday than it has done in years. So, what happens next? I mean, I'm tempted just to put my feet up and wait for you to ring me. I've noticed, and part of it is because I've got so much to say, but there has been a growing reluctance to get involved in this conversation as it has gone on, because it becomes harder and harder to say anything with substance or certainty, except the stuff that I say every day, which is essentially you can't say anything with substance or certainty. But as we look over the horizon, as we look at what may or may not happen next, then you can draw upon all manner of insights and ideas, because two things can be stated with absolute certainty. Donald Trump cannot be trusted, and Israel now will continue to attack, is continuing to attack Iran and Lebanon, even after Donald Trump appeared to announce some sort of ceasefire yesterday, albeit one that is specific to power plants. So just to recap on what we think we know, you have a war, probably illegal, undertaken by the United States of America and Israel, right? You have a very strong suggestion from Donald Trump's Secretary of State that they only got involved because they realised they weren't going to be able to stop Benjamin Netanyahu from doing it. You have, if you're a fan of such things, the fact that they claimed 9 months ago they had obliterated Iran's capability to do anything harmful to them, but then they come back 9 months later to do it all again, to re-obliterate, if that's even a verb. But bearing in mind what Marco Rubio said and then unsaid, because that's how Trump's regime works, they'll tell you something on a Monday, then they'll tell you the opposite on a Tuesday, even when it's the same person now. They don't even bother lining up somebody different from the regime to contradict what somebody different from the regime said yesterday. So you know that under that analysis, Netanyahu, if he was ever really bound by the concerns of either international law or international alliances, is now just pursuing whatever project he pleases entirely independently. The bombing of Lebanon going criminally underreported in this country, largely as a consequence of the attention that is being paid to Iran. He is going to carry on. And I can't quite see, and this is the thing that perhaps scares me the most, I can't quite see how Donald Trump's United States of America is going to be able to exert any pressure upon them to stop doing what they're doing. I don't know whether or not they can carry on without the United States of America on a scale that would be comparable with the scale they are now. Another thing that we know, thousands of Marines are currently making their way to the Middle East. Another thing we know, Donald Trump has been humiliated. I think the biggest plus you can say is that his character is so weird that he can move on from a humiliation and pretend it never happened in some ways much quicker than other people can. But then you remember that he bears grudges in some cases that go back decades. So a PhD needs to be written on why he can leave some humiliations alone and why some will continue to rankle and sting years, decades after the actual event. I don't think he's going to hold this humiliation against Iran, because it's not really Iran that have humiliated him. So you've got Marines heading to the Gulf. You've got Israel continuing to act with abandon, pursuing policies in Lebanon now that are similar to the policies they pursued in Gaza, where they committed genocide. You've got the rest of the world waking up belatedly to the fact that you can't trust a word that Donald Trump says. And you've got the fact that he is almost certainly incapable of reopening the Strait of Hormuz through force. Those seem to me to be the 5 big pieces on the table. You're welcome to add more. I used to be a showbiz journalist. I'm by absolutely no stretch of the imagination the be-all and end-all of conversations like this. In other words, you are just as qualified as I am to contribute. The only requirement for entry is that you've been paying attention and you care. Sadly, there are plenty of people in my profession who neither pay attention nor care, but I know that you do. So the 5 things that are in place, I think, would be Trump's humiliation, Benjamin Netanyahu's impunity and his continuing attacks, even after a so-called ceasefire has been announced, the thousands of Marines that are making their way to that part of the world, the impossibility, I think, of reopening the Strait of Hormuz using military force, and special prize for whoever could remember what the fifth point was that we've just cobbled together, but it's going to be somewhere in the space occupied by whoever is now in charge in Iran, isn't it? So, it's the lies. So you've got the humiliation and you've got the absolute untrustworthiness, the humiliation of yesterday's climb down, but also the permanent untrustworthiness of everything that he says and does. And then you've got the thousands of Marines who are making their way towards that part of the world. Then you've got the impossibility of reopening the Strait of Hormuz militarily. That's something that might be negotiable or debatable. And then you've got Netanyahu's determination to continue with his attacks on Iran and, of course, Lebanon, whatever the rest of the world thinks about it or whatever the rest of the world up to and including Donald Trump tells him about it. So what do you think is going to happen next? What is, for the world now, the best case scenario? And I don't like asking this question, but I think it's important that we do. What is the worst case scenario? I can tell you that Gulf states who have regarded Iran as a hornet's nest hanging over the peninsula since the Islamic resolution are now worried about a repeat of Suez if America bails out now. The Times reports today that Israel and the US have now stirred up that hornet's nest again, and the world is feeling the blowback as Iran cripples global energy supplies by closing the Strait of Hormuz and targeting refineries in the Gulf. So what is the best case scenario for the world, for you, for me, not for Donald Trump, but for the world, for the Iranian people, perhaps, given that they are, best case scenario at the moment is that they return to the hideous status quo that they were living under before. And what is the worst case scenario? How much history would you need to draw meaningful parallels with the Suez crisis? And between those two poles, the best case scenario and the worst case scenario, the truth probably lies. The likely outcome probably sits between those two extremes. What is, for you now, a or the likely outcome of this absolutely almighty, and I think that if we lived in a vaguely just universe, heads, professional and metaphorical heads would be rolling over the abject failure to recognise that all of this was completely and utterly predictable. Every single nanosecond of this unfolding horror was predictable and visible for space for one very simple reason. Donald Trump remains a deranged liar, and anybody making excuses for him or praising him is complicit in what is now happening. And what is now happening is, according to the people who know and care the most, an oil crisis worse than the 1970s and a diplomatic and political nightmare comparable potentially to what happened in Suez. So what the hell happens next?
So when you put everything we've just heard together, I think the bigger issue here goes beyond one awkward comment from Donald Trump. James O'Brien's argument is really about trust. Trump is making major claims about Iran, negotiations, and what America is supposedly achieving, while O'Brien is questioning whether those claims actually match what's happening on the ground. And when you're talking about something as serious as a conflict involving Iran, Israel, and potentially thousands of American troops, that matters. But there's another part of this that stood out to me. Nobody really seems certain about what comes next. You've got tensions around the Strait of Hormuz, continued military action in the region, concerns about energy supplies, and then all these competing claims about what is happening behind closed doors. Now, you might think James O'Brien went completely over the top with some of his language about Trump, and that's a fair debate to have. But underneath all of that anger, he does raise a question that's difficult to ignore when the stakes are this high. How much confidence should people have in what they're being told? Because ultimately, this isn't just about Trump or James O'Brien. Decisions being made here could have consequences far beyond Washington. So I'm interested in what you think. Was O'Brien right to be this concerned, or has his criticism of Trump gone too far? Drop your thoughts below. And if you enjoyed the breakdown, subscribe, because there's definitely more to come from this story.